Now, as you know, ecosystems go through many different changes throughout time. Now, there's different types of changes. The first type of change we're going to talk about is called short-term change. Now, a short-term change is something that you actually go through every single year. A short-term change is easily reversed. It's when the entire environment seems to be almost completely different, but then within 6 months, it returns back to the state that we know and love. An example of a short-term change is seasonal changes. As you know now, being that it's winter, it's very cold outside, and there's snow in a lot of places, especially with the snow we've gotten so far this year. So all these changes with the trees no longer having leaves, the ground being covered in snow, the lakes being frozen over, creates a change to the entire ecosystem. But as you also know, right when school gets out, what is it like outside? Warm, beautiful leaves on the trees, flowers growing everywhere, the lake is no longer frozen, the fish and the animals are swimming freely throughout. That is the short-term change of an environment. And we actually went to 80th Street Park to show you what it looks like during winter, because I'm sure you all have in your head what it looks like during summer. As you can see, this is an example of a short-term change. If you remember, a short-term change is something that happens and only lasts for a short while and will change back. Now, if you remember, what it changes back to is the regular summer park that you normally see during July and August. There is another type of change known as a long-term change. A long-term change is something that is not easily reversed. It takes, or many years overall, for the change to occur. Now, an example, or three examples rather, of long-term changes are climatic changes, such as the Ice Age. And I'm not talking about the movie, even though those are good. An ice age is when the entire ecosystem becomes basically covered in ice. In this case, you have what's known as glaciers, which are huge blocks of ice that can cover an entire continent. Glaciers do still exist, but mostly up north and very far down south. Now, another long-term change is human activity. We have a major ability, as you all know, to create major changes in our ecosystems. Driving your car creates carbon dioxide. These carbon emissions go up into the atmosphere and start to wreak havoc on the different layers of the atmosphere, creating more gases, not letting heat escape, creating global warming, as well as different other chemicals we create which help destroy the ozone layer, which we do not want to happen. But just something as simple as building a dam can create a great long-term change. We can change an entire ecosystem by not allowing flooding, because there's no more fertile soil being carried with the water. Since there's no more fertile soil, it makes it harder for farmers to farm. Also, the introduction of a non-native species is another type of long-term change. To take one of the native species and to throw another non-native species, which means that it doesn't necessarily belong there, can actually wreak havoc on an entire ecosystem. For example, in New York, we have what is known as you can see here, the jaybird, or bluebird. The bluebird is a natural part of the New York ecosystem. But not too long ago, the starling was introduced into New York. The starling is a large blackbird, bigger than the bluebird, and likes to steal habitats as well as food from the bluebird. Doing this, though, causes destruction to the bluebird's niche, eventually slowly killing off all the bluebirds, bringing them close to extinction. Of course, in New York, the humans there stepped up and started creating little homes for bluebirds that starlings were not capable of fitting in. This helped the bluebird exist and maintain its own stability, but bringing the starlings in caused a long-term change to that ecosystem. So as you know, we've already talked about ecosystems, but an ecosystem needs to maintain its balance. If it doesn't, we saw what happened with the frogs and the pigs in the rainforest. The entire ecosystem starts to collapse. So let's talk about how this balance is maintained. Just like in any sort of game, an ecosystem has a set of players. Now these players help maintain the balance of an ecosystem. Your first player is your producer. A producer is an organism that makes its own food. The process that allows plants like this to make their own food is known as photosynthesis. Now, a producer, since it's capable of making its own food from the sun through photosynthesis, is the beginning stage of the balance. Next is your consumers. Now, consumers are organisms that cannot make their own food. They need to go out and find food. Now, there are 4 types of consumers. You have an herbivore, like a cat. They only eat plants. You have a carnivore, like a tiger. They eat meat, other animals. You have a scavenger. A scavenger also eats meat, but it does not really do its own hunting. It waits for other animals, such as the tiger, to hunt, and whatever the tiger leaves over, the scavenger, or in this case the hyena, will go and eat later. And then you have your omnivore. An omnivore is an animal that eats both producers as well as meat. So we, for example, are omnivores. I'll tell you, I love vegetables as much as I love my chicken. Okay. Now there's a third player in an ecosystem. This third player is known as a decomposer. A decomposer basically is on top of all the other types of food. They're the bacteria and fungi that consume the bodies of dead organisms and other organic wastes. So every time you're walking down the street and you see a dog left a little present, that eventually will be decomposed by bacteria and fungi. They take all the waste and help make nutrients for the soil.
Eating, yes, you are a consumer. Oh, I shouldn't have said that loud.
This is an example of consumer eating a rose.
Oh, there we go. And there is another quick adaptation, how quick they can be.